Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right. So, just to give you a brief background, today's podcast is titled Harassment of Doctors in India. A brief background as to why we are discussing this. As you guys must be aware, in the last week or so, we had the unfortunate case of the suicide of Dr. Archana Sharma. I'm not going to get into the facts of the case because that is not the motto of today's podcast. Um, the thing was that when this incident unfortunate incident happened, Amit had written a very detailed thread, and then I reached out to Amit and I told him, why don't we get down and we look at it from a macro perspective. So Amit agreed, and here he is with me. Amit, welcome.
Thanks, Kushal. And this is something which is, very relevant and is a real pain point for the medical fraternity. And this incident has shaken the community up like never before. This has always been a hot issue. You must have seen numerous times doctors have gone on strike across the country
Yeah.
on this issue, and several other things events have taken place, but
Mhm.
there still doesn't seem to be any solution in sight.
So let's start with this, Amit. First, you lay it down for me. Tell me, how widespread is this issue? Also, not only widespread, like, is this only in certain states in India, or is it a global phenomenon where doctors are constantly under this stress all the time?
Yes, actually, this is not new, and this is actually a worldwide phenomenon. It's not actually India specific at all. And there have been numerous cases of assault on medical professional in various countries. In China, it was extremely common. In UK as well as Australia, it's very common. And Australia actually passed a strong legislation uh, which which basically gave a 10-year jail sentence for assaults against medical professional. So it was a problem which was serious enough to warrant that kind of intervention. So this is not at all a local phenomenon, and it's not new either, because now I have myself been in practice for 20 years plus, and this has been there since the time we actually entered the practice. It was a the incidence was not very well known earlier because there was no social media, but now since the advent of social media, you can say that the things get more easily highlighted.
So when you say harassment of doctors, what? So let's get into the detail. So what are the possible ways doctors can be harassed? Because it's a very vague term, right? So how do I understand it as a layman? Like,
Yeah.
डॉक्टर्स को harassment कैसे हो सकता? So I'll give you an example. जैसे हैदराबाद का तुझे केस याद है? वो उधर जाके उन्होंने डॉक्टर कुछ तो हुआ था केस, और उन्होंने जाके हॉस्पिटल ही फोड़ दिया था, कांच फोड़ दिए थे. I don't remember the particular hospital, so please don't quote me on that. But I remember the city. It was Hyderabad. I specifically remember. You and I are friends. You've told me many stories offline. I'm not going to mention them over here about the harassment you guys have faced. But that's not. But when we say harassment, try and explain to the listeners and the viewers what entails harassment for doctors.
See, most of the time when we talk of harassment of doctors, it's the direct, implied, or actual presence of the threat of violence, which really scares the doctors. There are various ways in which people issue these threats, you can say. But the main fear for doctors, rather than being harassed for other things, is the fear that they are going to get beaten up for having tried to treat a patient, by making some or the other allegations. So most of the fears of doctors rest along the lines of violence. But there are, of course, various other things that people do, which is inevitable in today's day and age. People are going to make nasty comments and posts on social media, whether they are justified or not. But that's kind of, every professional has to live with this. So that those are not kind of specific to our profession, but no other profession gets threatened for being beaten up just because you've not been able to cure a patient, or just because the patient doesn't want to pay your bills. This is very unique to our profession. And It's scary because one of my friends who was with me when I was doing my post graduation in surgery at San Hospital, he had a very nice newly made hospital at Pain, and the entire hospital was burned down by a mob with him and his family
What?
inside. Why? Because one local kabaddi player or something like that, young guy, 24-year-old, was brought in with sudden collapse, and they were unable to save him. So his entire hospital was burned down. He moved out of the city after selling whatever was there. So this is not just an imaginary thing. These are things that actually happen in the real world, you know. And it scares the hell out of people. And this was pre-social media age. It didn't get highlighted. Now people do highlight it, but that's the fact that we are living with, that it's the threat of violence, and we know that it is a very real threat because it's actually happened on people we know. One of my doctor colleagues was beaten up, and the staff of the hospital was beaten up when they declared a patient dead on arrival. This is a Chemburka doctor, okay, not even anywhere far. So what was his fault? He declared a dead person dead. These are very real things. They are not some imaginary things, and doctors are not. This is nothing to do with anything about any charges or anything at all. These both the cases which I'm telling are nothing to do with charges. I mean, what can you do with a broad dead person that you will still get beaten up? So these are very complex issues. It's there's no simple answer, and there's no simple solution either.
So a trend that I have observed when it comes to these kinds of scenarios is the political ping pong that happens, right? Sometimes it's one political party, like in the case of the unfortunate case of Dr. Archana Sharma. Lo and behold, it was the BJP person who was heckling the doctor, right? It was a
Yeah.
BJP person.
Yes.
And every time this happens, people try to bring in one angle, the other angle. In my opinion, all political parties are guilty as
Yes.
charged in this. There is not even a single political party that has not heckled a medical professional across the country. At least in India, we know that for a fact. Now, my question to you is then, to follow up, have political parties been approached by doctors' associations? What do they say?
The attitude of politicians is that it starts with "तुम लोग लूटते हैं." So when you approach them, they say कि हाँ तुम लूटते हैं इसके लिए लोग पिटते हैं. But that is not the fact. And that is, I'm telling you that this is not the fact because those same politicians will come to our hospitals and take treatment for themselves and their family members and pay the entire bill without even 1 rupee discount. But when it comes to, yes, and when it comes to patients, they will come with a mob of 100 people to tell you कि तुम लूट रहे bill कम करो. So this is purely to gain political brownie points that they do this shit, not out of any gain or benefit for public at large. They want to show that they are doing something, and we are sitting ducks for them to come and harass.
So let's unpack this. So you said they are looting the patients, right? So when you say looting the patient, so what, at the private level? And so what? Let's break that down even further.
Yeah, see, looting the patients, I'll tell you one thing that most of the attacks on doctors actually take place in government hospitals, which are free, where there is no charge at all to the patients. Yes, so this thing that doctors are looting the patients is humbug because most of the attacks on doctors are actually on the government doctors. You must have read how many times Sion Hospital doctors have gone on strike, right? How many times KEM doctors have gone on strike in Mumbai itself? I'm saying recently, in one doctor's beaten up in Jaipur. That was this case, and so many. In Assam, one government doctor on duty was murdered. Right, poor old guy was volunteering at a free hospital, and he was murdered at a free government hospital by a mob. He wasn't even being paid a salary. So when you talk about that this is because you people are looting the patient, no, not at all. Maybe some doctors are indulging in kind of malpractices. There are black sheep in every profession. But chalo, even if we assume that we are looting, so are you going to beat up every single person who overbills you? Is that a solution that you have in mind? That since you are charging me and I don't want to pay your bill, I'm going to beat you up? Is this how a civilized society should function at the end of the day? Now, in private setup, now this is as far as government setups is concerned, there are different sets of causes for each.
So let's get into
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when you say that the government setups are there, there, there is overcrowding.
Hmm.
The doctors and the nurses can't give adequate amount of attention to each individual patient. As far as us, the private sector is concerned, we have norms that for in the ward, for every 6 patients you need to have one staff nurse. For every 2 ICU patients you need to have one staff nurse. But in the government hospitals there are 50 patients and one nurse, or maybe 50 patients and two nurses. The ratio which is adherent to us is not applied over there. Patients don't get the amount of attention they would probably need, or the norms are bad, because I know the treatment which the patients get is still good and they do recover. So we have unrealistic norms which are different for public sector and different for private sector, right? Which is also one reason why the public sector gets even more stressed, and there are more attacks over there, because people don't communicate well with the patients. The attitudinal problem is there, and many hospitals have actually worked on this. KM has a program run only for the nursing and doctors, which teaches them on how to communicate better with the patients, and this is done only with the aim of reducing conflict zones and reducing the potential for conflict. Okay, so if this sort of a program is being run at a government hospital, where does anyone stand with these things, that because you're looting the patients? These are free hospitals, right? And they have to run programs against this. Now, in the private sector, we have two categories of patients who invariably get ticked off and threaten violence. One category are the patients who don't want to pay a bill. They'll come, they'll make all sorts of allegations, and those patients you can pick up relatively early, right?
Hmm.
As medical doctors, you can pick up कि ये patient तकलीफ देने वाला है, because from day one that patient is going to start creating that ambience so that he is able to get away without the
Hmm.
payment of the bill, right? Second category of patients are patient has expired. The mentality of people is such that patient मर गया तो हम पैसा नहीं देंगे. No matter how much the outstanding is, no matter how much you have spent on that patient, but they'll simply walk out without paying, and you can't hold the patient back, you can't hold the body back. So how do you recover your money? You just write it off. What can you do? You can't do anything. So if someone comes in, takes treatment, and walks out without paying your bills, the court says you can't hold the person back, right? The police says hamara matter nahi hai, because it's a civil matter, right?
Hmm.
Right? So they are not going to help you. Go and file a case in court. मेरा बिल था 30,000 रुपया, उसमें से वो 15,000 ही भर के गए. 15,000 रुपये के लिए मैं कोर्ट जाऊंगा. दे ऑल्सो नो आई वोंट.
Mm.
So you write that off. We had a patient, high percentage burns, more than 50% burns, right? She was there for 45 days in the hospital. Lot of time in intensive care, 2 3 multiple surgeries. Eventually patient didn't make it. The bill was some 13 14 lakhs, which is not much for that kind of a procedure for a patient. 7 lakh भरा था. We have written off the balance 6 lakhs. 5 lakh सिर्फ medicines का बिल था patient का. So what can you do about it? Tell me. We can't hold the patient's body. We can't tell the
Absolutely.
relatives to pay because they're going to break your hospital, or and these were polite people, right? They never threatened violence or anything. But when they walk out without paying anything, what can you do? Nothing, right? So we deal with multiple sets of problems. Now the third category of patients are insurance patients. Now one would be surprised that insurance patient में तो insurance company is paying, right? Patient आया and they've taken the treatment, and the insurance company is the one who's making the payment. Then what is the problem? The problem is insurance is at the whims and fancies of the insurance company. We send the papers to the insurance company, say this is the disease, this is the treatment proposed. Their insurance company tomorrow, next day, will raise a query that, okay, answer these following questions, why the patient needs to be admitted, etc. You write down an answer again, you reply to the insurance company. The third day, the patient raises more queries. You still don't have an approval.
Mm.
The fourth day, the insurance company sends a letter that your claim is denied because we don't think that whatever treatment you have recommended could have been done on OPD basis. Right? Patient is sick, patient is admitted, patient is taking treatment already since 3 days. द फोर्थ डे द इंश्योरेंस कंपनी सेज हम नहीं देंगे, पेशेंट बोलता है तुम नहीं देंगे तो मैं भी नहीं देगा, एंड वॉक्स आउट. व्हाट कैन यू डू? नहीं तो मैं तेरा हॉस्पिटल फोड़ दूंगा. व्हाट कैन यू डू? यू कांट डू एनीथिंग. यू हैव टू जस्ट hands, जाओ, don't break my hospital. And in all this, these politicians are involved because invariably they all have some or the other linkages to local politicians. You'll start getting calls. You'll start getting calls from Mantri ji. You'll start getting calls from Mantri ka PA. You'll start getting calls from municipality, and all of them threatening you directly or indirectly with some or the other penal action that तुम्हारा license cancel कर देंगे, तुम्हारे को 100 लोग भेज देंगे. Our local MLA actually told me this. I told him that, okay, I am a small hospital owner. I don't have the kind of bandwidth to let go of patients' bills. You are an MLA, right? You have funds. The amount is just 5-10,000. You support it from your MLA funds, right? मेरे
Mhm.
को बोलता है ठीक है मैं 100 लोग भेज देता हूँ डायरेक्टली ऑन माई फेस. व्हाट डू यू डू? What are we talking about that we are looting? We are asking for our regular charges. वो भी नहीं देते हैं लोग और जाते हैं धमकी देके डायरेक्टली. What do? You can't do anything. So we are a vulnerable group. People should realize this, that we are not some bunch of crooks and looters sitting over here. We are a vulnerable group who can be targeted by all and sundry. There will be people who are crooks in every single profession, right? होते हैं. You can't say that people are not there who are not crooks. Yes, but can you extend that same logic and just paint everybody with that same brush? If so, then why aren't people dying left, right, and center because of medical treatments? The fact is that if a patient comes to me or to any doctor,
Mhm.
doesn't get well, the next time that patient not going to go back to that doctor.
Absolutely.
So that is a big motivation for doctors to remain straight to their job as far as possible. Do they get money from pharma companies? Do they get money from pathology on referrals? Yes. Does that mean they are going to deliberately go on writing more tests and more medicines to the patient?
Mhm.
No, because they are still accountable to the patient at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when people do realize this, that accountability factor is where the problem comes, that people think that we are not accountable to anybody. No, that's not true. If we aren't, then we can't sustain our practice at all.
Mhm.
So that accountability factor has to be one considered, that doctors do not want to lose patients. You see the number of doctors who practice on weekends. On
Mhm.
Saturday, Sunday, their clinics are running.
Mhm.
Why? Because if my availability is not there on Saturday, Sunday, my patient will go to somebody else.
Mhm.
So when you have that kind of a stressor always on the doctors, most of them will remain true to their job. There will be black sheeps, no doubt, but they are exception rather than rule.
You know what I find fascinating in this entire process is, so there could be 3 4 scenarios that can happen in this. See, every business has a bad debt scenario, right? These are bad debts. I'm looking at it, I know doctors are a noble profession, blah blah blah, but everything has a balance sheet, right? Everything. If you are a private entity, I'm not talking about government hospitals, I'm talking about private hospitals. Everything has a balance sheet. Now, if you have certain write-offs every year, it, see, obviously it's not like 100% of a doctor private hospital is a write-off. It's not. Let's just get real. But what happens is, when there are write-offs, it's a cost to the business. Whether we like it or not, a private hospital is also a business. It's not a charitable trust. A private hospital run by hard-earned money of that individual person who has put that hospital is their money. They're going to make a profit out of it, whether we like it or not. Write-offs are going to go where? They are going to overburden the patients in the end. Secondly, if you're going to threaten doctors, you're going to go after them, they might hire private security to deal with such scenarios. What does that do? Again, it adds to the cost of the hospital. Where is the hospital going to recover it from? Again, from the patients. Now, in such an incestuous loop, then comes the government and says, you can't charge. So, how do we solve this?
This is what happened to us even in the COVID wave,
Exactly, मैं
right?
तेरे को कोविड के ऊपर ही लेके आ रहा
हाँ,
था.
so क्या हुआ था in COVID wave? What happened was, there was, of course, in the initial part where hospitals and doctors, the hospitals had to deal with incoming large number of COVID patients. The first wave, the staff disappeared. right? About 70% of the medical staff had disappeared at that time. We were functioning with 30% of staff. सामने से जो भी मांग रहा था सैलरी, उसको वो सैलरी पे देके रखना पड़ रहा था. People whom I was paying 20,000 bucks had to be re-roped in at 75-80,000 bucks. Running cost went up 3 to 4 times, right? Obviously that cost was eventually passed on to the patients, because there's no way we can sustain that kind of thing, right? Oxygen purchase cost to 100 rupees per cylinder that shot up to 350 rupees per cylinder. Who's going to pay for that cost? Ultimately the patient is only going to pay for that cost. Some mischievous hospitals at that time took advantage of this situation and raised massive bills, which I also saw, and which were not justified.
Mm.
But most of the hospitals had decent bills, right? You see the number of posts, all of the posts will have the same 2 3 inflated bills. Social media posts, I was tracking the bills, right? This, there were hardly 2 3 of the same bills which were being posted by everybody, and those were used to introduce orders capping the price of treatment by the state government across the board,
Mm.
right? Now that did not consider the massive increase we had incurred in our cost of running, right? That did not incur the factor whether the patient has in a private room or a general ward, all have to be paying the same, right? uh, they did not consider the purchase cost of medicines, because medicine also you have to include in that little package of
Got it.
4,000 rupees,
Got it.
right? They did not consider the purchase cost of oxygen. Initially they had excluded oxygen, later they said at the time when the oxygen cost was the highest for us, they say now oxygen also is included in this.
And they were also rationing ना, आप इतना ऑक्सीजन इतने पेशेंट को दे सकते हो, इतना ऑक्सीजन इतने पेशेंट को दे सकते हो. It's like this is a classic case of how second order, third order effects of a policy happen. So let's say, I'm not saying any hospital did it, I'm envisaging this could be the case. So if they ration the oxygen level of distribution, कि एक पेशेंट को इतना ऑक्सीजन लगेगा, it's unbelievable that the government is deciding this. The doctor should be deciding it on the shop floor, treating the patient, but the government will decide कि तू इसको 4 बाटले से ज्यादा नहीं देगा. In that case, if a patient does require more and the doctor and the hospital cannot give it, what will they do? They will avoid treating such a patient. I'm just trying to think out loud.
This is actually what happened in
Wow.
real life, okay? This is
Crazy.
what happened in real life, okay? Because the result of all these policies were that patient requiring anything more than 2 liters of oxygen in corporate hospitals what was put in the ICU.
Mm-hmm.
So the result is you have patients who could have potentially been managed in the ward with low flow oxygen landing up in ICU, blocking ICU beds, leaving those ICU beds for the most critically ill patients who didn't get them. A lot of patients didn't get beds because when they say that you have filled the beds with people who are not that serious and that's why there is a shortage, it's the government which caused it, because you put in policies which make it impossible for these patients to be treated in a ward, right? You put a cap at a price which people just cannot afford to do. So this led to indirect consequences for the patients at the end of the day, right? So this did happen in corporate hospitals. I mean, it is a fact which we have to live with, that this actually did happen. Now, in non-corporate hospitals, who they manage with these costs, and how they managed, because frankly, I'm telling you, they didn't adhere to those costs which the government had capped, right? That's why they could sustain. Now, come to the other side of it. People will say that तुम लोग ने तो कमाया. हाँ, it was boom time not only for hospitals, it was also boom time for the pharma companies, for mask manufacturers, right? For food suppliers at home, right? There was a whole segment of industry which benefited. But did all doctors benefit? No. I am surgeon. 2 years I sat empty. I didn't have any surgical practice. कोई surgery के लिए आ नहीं रहे,
हाँ.
right? It's all medical admissions, right? So surgeons didn't get work. Gynacs, yes, they earned at that time, because gynacs have to earn around the year, right? Physicians earned, pediatricians relatively earned, right? But surgical branches suffered. So it's not as if all doctors were earning. Now, hospitals' bulk of income is surgical work,
Mm.
which came to zero, right? Big surgeries are not happening. People don't realize. You see the insurance claim ratios. People say that insurance companies hiked up their premiums, saying that that so much of additional burden of COVID, they actually saved money. Because their claim ratios, when you look at them, They actually have saved money on insurance patients because they didn't have any planned work happening. Elective surgeries were completely zero. So the average claim ratio actually fell for them. So when we are talking about, insurance companies actually made money during the pandemic because so many additional policies they sold during that time. So it is a very different scenario from what people are thinking.
Mm.
It's
So okay, it's very interesting because a live viewer has also because I wanted to ask it. So does the overwhelmingly negative portrayal of doctors in entertainment media or TV serials or by politicians also add to all of this? Yeah, I saw videos of babus, even cops. आज ही तूने वो share किया था cop का. What nonsense was that?
they don't have jurisdiction. Imagine police commissioner saying that if you're prescribing tests, we will take action. Bloody, it's not your jurisdiction. Who are you to take action? I mean, really, is this guy serious? Is he in his senses? What is he talking? Is it the police jurisdiction when you can't take my complaint regarding the patient not paying his bill? When you have no bloody right. What is it? When we go approach the police that this patient has left without paying the bill, they don't take our complaint. They say go to the court. And
Hmm.
here, because a patient is paying for some additional tests, allegedly paying for some additional tests, which because they came normal, you say that they were not required.
Mhm.
हम अंतर्यामी है, हमको मालूम है वो रिपोर्ट पहले से ही नॉर्मल आने वाला है. What nonsense is this? Meaning today, if I have to think that if I write 10 tests to the patient, 3 come positive and 7 come negative, they'll say you advise 7 unnecessary tests, so we are going to file a case against you. I mean,
It's
what shit
actually,
is this, yaar?
yeah,
Come
it is
on.
crazy. It's actually, ये तो ऐसा हो गया कि मतलब पहले पहले से एडवांस में एनविसाज कैसे करेगा.
No, I see, and the biggest chunk of people who do unnecessary tests is who? Your package pathology companies. Bloody hell, you
Yeah,
yourself.
so let's talk about that. So yeah, so this is something that so what is this whole thing? What are these tests that are prescribed? आप ये test करो, वो test करो. So let's
See
let's
you.
break that down.
Yeah. So you see that the largest number of unnecessary tests are those conducted in the name of wellness. Are they needed? No. You need to do tests particular to your examination. Visit your doctor. He will advise some tests which need to be done if you are not well. General health checkup is the biggest unnecessary test industry that there is. The you'll get a nice glowing brochure that check your health, maintain your good health, and here these 100 tests for 1500 rupees or 2000 rupees. Do you need those 100 tests? How many of those come positive in people? One in a thousand.
Yeah.
999 unnecessary,
Yes.
and you are self-inflicting it. And when a doctor is examining you and advising certain tests, you are looking for which ones are unnecessary in that. Maybe there may be 5 tests.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So how does this make any sense? On the one hand, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is promoting wellness, saying that you get all these tests done, because you're no, the tests are supposed to be for picking up diseases, right? Picking up diseases in people who don't have any problem
Mm.
to begin with. Right now, you've come to a doctor who's seen you, who's examined you, and there is a problem. He's advising you tests accordingly, and you start looking, "Hey, मेरा report normal कैसे आ गया? ये तो doctor को." I mean,
Why am I not feeling bad?
what is this? Really?
Yeah, but अमित प्रॉब्लम ये है ना कि ये सब इश्यूज हैं इसमें. why is it such a scenario that the blame at the end of the day always comes on the doctor? टेस्ट मैंने थोड़ा ना किया, तूने ही प्रिस्क्राइब किया, ऐसे बोलेंगे, फिर क्या करोगे?
See, if a patient is coming to me, today's day and age, there is something called as defensive medicine. And this has been brought about as a direct consequence of making a doctor patient relationship into a consumer provider relationship, right? You
Hmm.
understand where this all stems from. When the doctor patient relationship, the doctor has become a provider and the patient has become a consumer, he's liable for everything.
Yeah.
So when I'm liable for everything, if I don't write a test, next person comes in and says he should have done that test. The patient sues me that you didn't do my test. You missed my disease,
सब लिख दो.
right? So what happens as a result of that? In the US, it's very well established system of defensive medicine, where if you need to go to the doctor, you get all your tests done, then you go for your appointment, right?
Got it.
Here, you'll come to me, I'll advise you what tests need to be done. At least it's not as bad a situation right now, because US people sue much more than what people sue here, right? So this is an unfortunate reality of our times that we have to live with. That when we are living under a Consumer Protection Act, the doctor will write one or two tests more than what maybe he may think, that in case he should not miss something. That is a very common scenario which can happen. And when you are in a big corporate hospital, it will happen even more, because they are going to play even more defensive. Because if a liability comes on them, it will be massive. So
Hmm.
doctors in a big corporate hospital will always be generous with investigations, not only for financial reasons, because the doctor really doesn't stand to gain anything on the tests. Right? He's an employee, he's being paid a salary.
Hmm.
But because the hospital can get sued for a huge amount in case they miss something. So I've seen things like, patient coming out of the OT having chills because of IV fluid. The staff will collect a malarial parasite because they don't want to miss something. It's a corporate hospital. What if they miss a subclinical disease there and they get
Hmm.
sued? So their logistics are different. They deal with different kind of logistics. At a nursing home level, I'll still say jane de kya karne ka hai, But when you're talking of big corporate hospitals, they are going to play ultra defensive, which means directly translating into massive increase in cost for the patient.
No wonder those hospitals are expensive as hell.
They will be, because see, they have you. If you go to a five-star to eat food, it's going to be expensive because it's tam jam which you're paying for, not the food.
Yeah.
You come to a small nursing home, you'll get the same surgery done for 50,000, which you would have paid a lakh and a half in a corporate hospital, because you're going for the ambience. You're not going for the medical treatment. Medical treatment you can do even at smaller setups at much lesser cost,
Hmm.
right? You can purchase maybe the same goods from multiple stores. You go to a huge mall, it will be expensive because it will be marked up. You go to an airport shop, it's going to be marked up even more. And you go to your nearby store where you may get it cheaper, or you may get it even cheaper on Amazon. So I'm talking about it in terms of product, because we have ultimately been reduced to offering medical products.
Hmm.
So you have to understand that we, when you see what the government is interpreting it as, you see the rate lists which the government is offering the doctors. They are offering medical treatment packages. It's made as a commodity. Already it's been commodified. So really you can't do much about it. The more and when you're dealing with minimalistic treatments, it becomes impossible to be defensive at all. Like, if your package amount which the government is offering in one
Hmm.
of their own schemes like Pradhan Mantri is so pathetic that you can't even get basic tests done, you can't even have defensive medicine. So big corporate hospitals are never going to agree to those kind of package rates, no matter how much people want, basically. So that's one aspect of it. Now, uh, what is the thing, lost track?
Yeah, it's okay. So let's get into it. So it's
Yeah,
okay. You lost track. Sometimes it happens.
yeah.
So if if I am an average middle class Indian and I'm watching this podcast, what's going on in my head is मैंने क्या गुनाह किया is a very common theme, right?
Right.
They will be like, yeah, I see doctors. I don't know how to say this, but doctor. It's not like doctors are hated. They're respected too. They're respected in the society. It's a profession that still carries a little bit of weight and respect. The average person. I mean, otherwise, doctor. Everybody would be, leaving the job and going away. So it's not like that. But I'm just thinking as a person who's going to go to a doctor again. Now, when I listen to this, I get scared. I get worried. I was like, whom do I trust? Do I trust the doctor? Do I trust the government? Do I trust the cop? And now let me ask you about the cops also. So, how do the cops respond to the doctors when the doctors do approach the cops? Like, what is the say? It's like I know what will happen in the politician. Look, the politician is a politician. उसके पास डॉक्टर जाएगा, पॉलिटिशियन का फंडा क्लियर है, वो मेरा वोटर है. आई डोंट अंडरस्टैंड, क्या डॉक्टर वोट नहीं करते क्या?
But the percentage difference, na? We
Exactly.
are,
So percentage difference. So it is like a vote bank issue. So I understand the political classes point of view. They might go to the doctor and say piche se are yaar doctor saab dekh lo kind of a thing, they will do that.
Yeah.
They will never do it in front of the public. But what about the cops? How can the cops be anti doctor? What is this funda?
This is something that actually doctors have worked on also a lot. I'll be honest with you that doc- the cops are also part of general population at the end of the day. People approach them with all sorts of things, and it's natural that they will take the side of the common public rather than doctors. So I don't blame them for taking people's sides, but the problem comes that they don't have a very positive or encouraging attitude. When you go to them, they also have already bought the same narrative कि तुम लोग लूट रहे हैं. So their natural sympathies, whether you have built the patient or not, is that they will invariably at first glance side to the patient. Now I'll tell you an example. There was a patient who was hospitalized at our place, right? That patient was a government CG central government patient, CGHS patient. The entire treatment for COVID was done at CGHS rates, right? When a patient wants credit, the CGHS has to issue a letter, right?
Mm-hmm.
That letter was not brought by the patient, despite telling again and again that you need to bring the letter for getting credit, otherwise you have to pay the full amount upfront. Billing was patient recovered. Billing was done completely at the CGHS rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
When the time comes for discharge, the relative stands and starts abusing me कि मैं नहीं भरेगा तुमको क्या करने का है करो. I say you have to pay, and believe it or not, we did not have even 1 rupee deposit out of a bill of 1.5 lakh. We did not have even 1 rupee deposit with the patient, and that patient goes to the police, and the policeman calls me up. इसको आप कैसे बोल रहे हो, इसको आप कैसे रोक सकते हो? I said sir, 1 रुपया भी नहीं पेशेंट ने दिया है, पूरा का पूरा ट्रीटमेंट हो गया.
Mm.
पेशेंट 15 दिन आईसीयू में था. Full treatment has been done, everything has been done. We had told him get credit note, he has not brought. So then after that the policeman actually asks this fellow क्या रे तुमने credit note नहीं दिया, and the patient says हाँ वो नहीं दिया, वो रह गया. And then the cop says ठीक है सब मैं इसको देखता हूँ, और tells him कि go get the credit note or go pay the bill.
Mm.
So but the first impulse of that guy is to call me up and threaten me. How you're not doing. See, the first impulse of these people is to side with the person. Whether they are right or wrong is immaterial to them.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, same thing happened. One patient, I gave you the example of insurance patient, right?
Yeah.
Patient का approval नहीं आया. Patient walked out without paying the bill. Nothing I could do about it. Go straight to the police station. The hospital did not give me my file. Tell them to give my file. Policeman calls me up. The senior inspector calls me up and says, "How you cannot give us file?" I said, "I'm ready to give. Tell him to come and clear his bill and take his file." He says, "How can you see that? Okay, I'll take his complaint and I'll take action."
Mm.
Right? And I by law have to inform if a patient has gone away like that without taking the document. So I sent a letter to the police station that patient has absconded without taking the papers, without clearing the bill. And he writes on my complaint that we have already taken the patient's cognizant complaint into record, and we will act according to that. You see, the entire balance is automatically tilted against us, irrespective of whether we have done anything right or wrong. In Kharghar itself, where my hospital is, a nursing home was attacked, vandalized, everything inside was broken from top to bottom. The police stood by and watched it happen. They stood by and watched it happen. They did not interfere.
That's disgusting. Even if the hospital was at a fault, nobody has the right to burn it down or break it down, right?
That's how it is. So, because to counteract this, doctors actually have worked a lot on this to take care of this negative perception. They actually approached police stations in as part of IMA. I know because I myself was in that some of the representations which we made, and we went to the police station, spoke to the senior officers in the police station, who gave us a sympathetic hearing, told them that these are the problems we face. You please act when we face calls like this, when we face threats of violence. We request you to act. There is a law passed by the state government which which deals specifically with violence against medical professionals. You please book people under that act, because under that act, if someone damages your property, you are entitled to recover twice the amount as damages, and they get at least 7 years jail. There is a law
Mm.
like that in place in Maharashtra. Has it stopped anyone from this? No. How many people have been booked under this act? Very few. How many people have been convicted under this act? Literally no one. This is the fact on ground. The policemen are not even ready to book people under this act. They will just book under some trivial sections which can easily be granted bail and they can get away, because the odds are always going to be stacked against us.
So, what do you think eventually then the only solution for hospitals is hiring private security then?
Yeah, many people are doing it. Hospitals are hiring bouncers who are very visibly present at the entrance. Small nursing homes, one or two. Large hospitals have got a big security force, right? Why does a hospital need security? But the fact is that there are security force available, right? There is actually a code violet for violence against medical professionals, which is part of the NABH drill. Can you beat that? There we actually have a protocol driven response to violence against medical professionals in the hospitals.
Well, so much for that.
I mean, these are just cruel realities that we are living with every day.
In fact, I know in government hospitals, I remember the violence usually, in fact, the poor RMOs are always, under the line of fire. सब मतलब सीनियर डॉक्टर्स तो अंदर होते हैं मगर वो आरएमओस की धुलाई होती रहती है, राइट? ऐसा ही
Yeah.
होता है ना?
बिल्कुल होता है, and at Sion Hospital I know one, and this I'm talking about the late 90s, where my wife Anjana had to be escorted out of the NICU, neonatal intensive care, when one child had collapsed inside because there was a mob waiting out to attack them.
My goodness.
So we have faced this. It's not some issue which, I mean, every single doctor has actually faced this. It's not something which is imagined or just, and it's not something that is to do with money. It's something which is attitudinal, because people think कि तुम अपना काम नहीं कर रहा है इसके लिए मेरा patient क्या. I'll tell you one, just it's kind of a joke, but it's kind of not a very, I mean, I laughed at it, but it's actually, it'll tell you exactly the kind of thought process which, because of which these problems come. I was visiting one of my friends who's a GP in a slum area, right?
Hmm.
And I was chatting with him, and and he was a skilled guy, like he had worked in the intensive care of hospitals for a while. And I
Hmm.
told him that in case you get a seriously ill patient, do you put an endotracheal tube, you will you do intubation and all that over here to stabilize the patient till he goes. He's, what his answer was? Galti se bhi nahi.
Huh?
हाँ. I said, why? But what why गलती से भी नहीं? He's saying the moment I do that, and the patient collapses, ना, the relatives are going to say कि हमारा patient तो अच्छा था, ये डॉक्टर ने ट्यूब डाल के चोकअप कर दिया.
Mm.
So you realize that there is a problem, and the problem is in the failure of people to realize that, that we are a profession where we are always going to get easily targeted, because there are so many things that can go wrong so easily with the patient. And we
Mm.
are not gods to ensure that everybody is going to get cured and go away, right? Get well and go. There are going to be problems, there are going to be mistakes, there are going to be patients who don't make it despite you doing your best. The moment you start targeting doctors for not being able to deliver results every single time, I'll tell you, it's, if you look at our code of ethics, we are not allowed to promise 100% results legally. We are
Mm.
not allowed to. There is a
Mm.
reason for that,
Yeah.
because we can't.
Yeah, it's a scientific method. It's based on
Yeah, so we
probabilities.
can we can say that we will do well, we can do the best for you. Our chances of giving you the success are maybe 99%, but you can't say 100%. There's a doctor who got his license suspended for 6 months because he offered the patient money back if there is a failed treatment. He was suspended for 6 months. So people don't realize that we can't promise 100% results, we can't promise the earth, not because we don't want to, but because we just can't legally, and it's not right to. Also, there are going to be cases where things are going to go wrong. That does not mean that we didn't do our best. There will be cases where doctors will make mistakes, there will be cases where doctors are going to be grossly negligent. Should you be beating them up for it? Should you be threatening violence with a mob for it? Would you Do you want to demolish their hospital for it? That is not how civilized population works,
Yeah, it should not work
unfortunately.
like that. No civilized country will tolerate anything of this sort, and I definitely feel India is not in the uncivilized department. India is in the civilized department, and it's a shocker to me. And look, I don't know how to say it. Like, every profession is going to have bad apples, like you said. To make it sound as if a doctor is not allowed to make one mistake is, it's a pretty heartless world we're trying to live in. And and you know what happens is that every single social ailment of Indian society is mixed with every issue. So, like, even in the unfortunate case of Dr. Archana Sharma, everybody's trying to make it a caste issue, which I don't want to, because not every is there casteism in India? Yes. Is there religious bigotry in India? Yes. Name one place on planet Earth where these things don't exist.
Yeah.
It exists. Yeah, the degrees might vary. I'm not saying that all countries have the same level of bigotry. Yes, societies vary in terms of behavior, and I'm willing to accept that. But now tell me, you know, what are the psychological impacts of this on not only the current doctors, and तूने आज tweet लिखा कि you want to quit.
Yeah.
No, but then अगर सभी quit कर देंगे तो करेगा कौन?
Self treatment, Google hospitals. What else? I mean, you really, it has taken a lot of thought for me to actually say that I'm ready to quit this profession now, because I've had enough. I mean, see, there are situations where, I have, I didn't stop my daughter from becoming a doctor, right? I told her, I deterred her, maybe you can say, for a year or
I
so. I
know
said
that.
it's. I told her it's a thankless profession, and you get a lot of satisfaction on making people well, but be prepared for the worst. And she was prepared to deal with all these consequences, so she took it up. Now, but my younger daughter was pursuing entrance exam, and she dropped out, and I was happier, right? Because she said, no, I don't want to pursue medicine anymore. I will want to go for law. So I was actually happy. And I'm not alone over here. Most of the doctors don't want their kids to take up medicine. And there is a reason for it, right?
Hmm.
They don't want. Some of them have gone to the extent of saying that we will not allow you to take also, even if you want to become. And there is a reason for that, because they are fed up. If you look at the general disaffection in the doctor community, it's huge.
Hmm.
Given the choice, many doctors simply move on to other things. You see the number of doctors who earn a side living by investing in stock market. You'll be surprised. I mean, it's a huge number of doctors who actually earn more money from stock market than they do from their own practice.
That's
If
right.
they get
Very
an
true.
opportunity, they will move on to something else. My friend, who's a pediatrician, very good pediatrician, right? After 2 3 years in practice, he left it, and what is he doing? He's doing his family business of textiles. टेक्सटाइल्स कॉटन कॉटेज का ओनर है वो.
It's crazy.
So the people who have a plan B, even remotely visible, are moving to that. See, people always say, look at doctors and say that like doctor kitna chhapte hain. Boss, those are selected bunch of doctors in selected hospitals who receive packages
So
which
what
are
about the
huge.
psychological trauma
Huh.
the doctor goes through?
That nobody will ever talk about.
Odd
See if.
hours. अरे यार, मैंने आई मीन तेरे और मेरे
Hmm.
कॉमन दोस्त हैं कितनी, मैंने तुझे कितनी बार रात को लेट फोन किया हुआ है, तुझे डिस्टर्ब किया हुआ है. I mean,
That is part of our job. What can we
I
do
mean,
about it?
what am I saying? I mean, you are there. I mean, our common friend Manish is there. I've so many times मैंने मनीष को डिस्टर्ब किया है या तुझे किया है. अभी करे क्या, और कुछ नहीं होगा तो मैसेज तुम लोग को ही करेंगे ना. So obviously I understand there's a psychological trauma. Your sleep cycles are not perfect. Doctors do not have a perfect sleep cycle.
Hmm.
So उसके health impact होते हैं. लोग ये तो समझते ही नहीं है कि उसके हेल्थ इंपैक्ट होते हैं. दूसरा, उसके बाद कांस्टेंट फियर की कोई भी आके धुलाई करके चले जाएगा. ये है. बट एक मेरे को आई वांटेड टू टॉक टू यू अबाउट दिस आल्सो. व्हाट इज अप विद द कॉस्ट? एंड मैं तेरे को बताता हूँ ये एंगल क्या है. देख, ऑनेस्टली मुझे नहीं मालूम था बहुत सारे मेडिकल स्टूडेंट्स यूक्रेन क्यों जाते हैं. ये रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर ने मुझे ये बता दिया, यूक्रेन में मेडिकल प्रोफेशन की पढ़ाई सस्ते में हो रही है. प्राइमरी रीजन और कुछ नहीं है उधर जाने का. सो व्हाट इज इट with this? Why is the cost of healthcare so high?
Cost of medical education in India, first of all, is not high as such if you look at it, right? I'll tell you why I'm saying that. People always look at medical education in the small subset of 50% of private hospital seats, which are deemed universities, and say that cost of medication education is so high. That's why most of the, doctors are looting us. But what is the percentage of seats which actually come out of those private medical colleges in the paid seats? It is maybe not even 20% of the overall number of medical seats, if you look at it, right? In that, most
Hmm.
of the doctors are coming out from government hospitals where the fees are 1 lakh annually, right? Now, why should a government hospital be charging 1 lakh annual fees? Nobody's asking that. It was 10,000 and it's increased to 1 lakh. The same people who don't realize that this has meant that the poor class of people like farmers and laborers, their children can't aspire to be medical practitioners anymore because they can't pay even that 1 lakh fees annually, right? Nobody ever talks about that aspect of it. They will point out of the 1 crore fees of a private hospital, private seat, right, and say कि इसकी वजह से तुम लोग लूटते हो. But now
Hmm.
I'm telling you, I did my post graduation from surgery from Sion Hospital. I did my undergraduation from DY Patil, which is a private hospital,
Yeah.
right? There are many people like me. Why did I do it? Because I didn't get through in Sion Hospital or didn't get through to a government hospital. Why? Because 50% reservation, right? I could
Hmm.
have walked into any, and in fact in surgery I did walk into a government medical college comfortably, right, at the end of the day. So it's not that people who are there are certain constraints which we have to live with. Right now students are living with the constraint that 70% of reservations in Maharashtra. It's a reality we have to live with. Only 30% of seats are in open merit, right?
Hmm.
People will say that okay, 70% of candidates are also from the reserved categories only, so it's fine. But among them also, the ones who have the rank don't opt for the reservation. That also cuts into the open merit.
Okay.
So this is an issue. Why I'm specifically talking about this issue is because many of the people who are going in private medical colleges, we assume that वो अपनी सीट खरीद रहा है, which is not necessarily true. He may be a perfectly meritorious candidate who didn't get through because he got disadvantaged at the end. People with very high need scores, right? 550 plus need scores had to go to private medical college this time because they didn't get a seat. Is that a bad score? No, it's a great score. But people with 200 have got across need because they were reserved candidates.
Hmm.
So it's not as if everyone who's in a government hospital is meritorious. It's not as if everyone who's in a private hospital is a dud who's purchasing his degree.
Hmm.
First of all, we should understand this aspect of it.
Okay.
People won't like it, but this is a fact on ground, right? There wasn't a single open merit seat in post graduation dermatology this year. Not one seat. The university topper did not get the seat. All India rank 1 did not get the seat. What are we talking about here? What merit are we talking about? There is no meritocracy in medical education in India. Now, regarding the admission structure, even in the private medical colleges, certain number of seats are reserved for reservation candidates which are at lower fees than regular.
Hmm.
Certain number of seats are fixed at government rates, and only a certain number of fees the private medical college can charge whatever they feel like.
Hmm.
And obviously when they are given the freedom for those limited number of seats, they're going to charge whatever they feel like, right?
Got it.
Because they have to maintain huge departments, they have to maintain a huge campus, they have to maintain huge overheads. For producing a batch of 50 students they need to have a staff of 200. Who's going to pay for that? They have to have a 300-bed hospital of their own. All this costs money at the end of the day, right? Who's going to pay for that? The students. And that is why the cost of medical education is very high.
And one of the reasons a lot of students opt to go out of India to get
Yes,
educated.
because see, when you have unrealistic norms like having a 20-acre campus for a medical college in a city, which the government now generously reduced it to 5 acres, you think anyone is able to purchase 5 acres in a metropolitan city today's day and age? It's not possible. So you'll see
Mhm.
all these medical colleges are opening, the all the medical colleges, most of them which are opening are not MBBS. They are opening Ayush because it's cheap. Nobody
Mhm.
regulates them as much as the MBBS ones are regulated. आयुष कॉलेजेस में लिटरली कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंस पे पीजी डिग्री मिलता है.
Mhm.
Nobody is monitoring that,
Mhm.
right? But nobody is talking about it either, and they are cheap,
Mhm.
right? Now we are talking about only MBBS and post graduation in allopathic or modern medicine,
Mhm.
which is expensive. But Ayush degrees are cheap, right? Yet they don't get accused for being. You must have seen an Ayush doctor recently was very much in the news because it's an Ayush doctor running a wellness clinic, having all sorts of IV drip medications as wellness packages for skin glow, for constipation and whatnot shit, right? Not looting because Ayush वाले लूट नहीं सकते किसी को, right? All allegations are always on the allopathic people. So these are unfortunate realities. Now, why people go to Ukraine? Because it's cheaper there than a private medical college seat. Which students go there? The ones with a lower mark and those ones which can't afford. मेरे plumber का बेटा वहां पढ़ता है in Ukraine.
Mhm.
So he's in Russia. He's now come back and he can't go back. He's not in Ukraine. He was in Russia. So it's not only Ukraine. It's Ukraine, Russia, China, Philippines,
Maldives.
Maldives, even Maldives. And there is another reason why also people go there because their degrees aren't recognized here. They have to give an entrance exam here on coming back if they want to practice here. But their degrees are recognized in some foreign countries. Now, if a person goes to Maldives and does the medical education there,
Mhm.
that guy will draw a package for an MBBS degree, which may be 3, 4 times what he will draw in India. Why would he want to even come back here? Ukraine degrees are valid in some Western countries. They straight away migrate abroad.
Mhm.
Many of these people will come back here and never practice medicine. They may go on to do MBA and go on to do hospital administration. Many people will practice medicine over here. So this is a much more complicated issue because it's not one place; it's so many places, and these are people who are at the lower spectrum of the marks. Definitely, generally, who have not had adequate coaching. If you remember, I had also put one tweet series on this that if you don't want to go abroad for your medical education, spend money on and invest in good coaching classes which can get you in that small bracket which is going to get a seat here, either in a government medical college or in a private medical college which is the university affiliated. Like for example in Maharashtra we have MUHS affiliated medical colleges. They are private medical colleges, but their charges are not 25 lakh 30 lakh annually. Their charges are 7 8 lakhs 6 lakhs annually, which is pretty okay for a good professional course. Most professional courses, good professional courses would cost that much in today's day and age.
Okay. But if I was to look at it from a statistical perspective, um, see, a lot of these things have been said about. Let me draw a parallel analogy about RTE, right? RTE in schools, how they have affected. But to be honest, RTE has not affected Maharashtra schools all that much. The schools that were started in Maharashtra were not working in the first place. So to blame that on RTE was actually a straw man. RTE was a unique problem to the primarily to the state of Tamil Nadu, basically. I mean, बॉम्बे में तो देख हमारे यहाँ पे क्योंकि आरटीई का फंक्शन क्या है कि not only does a religious minority, even a linguistic minority can work. तो बॉम्बे में अच्छे schools और colleges कौन से हैं? Sindhi community has
Sindhi, yeah.
Sindhis have done it,
Yeah.
Gujaratis have done it, Marwadi community has done it, various खालसा कॉलेज पंजाबी कम्युनिटी का है, पंजाबी कम्युनिटी चलाती है, ठीक है. तो ऐसा तो है नहीं कि वहां पे नहीं हो रहा है एंड वो परफेक्टली लिंग्विस्टिक माइनॉरिटी के अंडर है. So obviously from what I have understood is that it's not the reservations per se that are the problem. The problem is, are you trying to say that the lack of seats is the problem itself?
I don't know why so many people want to do medicine in the first place. It's such a
So
low
you feel
paying.
we have an over application in India itself, that we
Yeah.
have sufficient doctors. Pata nahi, why does it feel that I don't feel we have enough doctors?
We have enough doctors.
If you
See, I'll tell you,
calculate
Doug,
Ayush,
if I'll tell you one thing. If you don't calculate Ayush, still I think we have more or less equal. If now
कैसे?
the one for 1100 population, and WHO standard is one per thousand population. And if you consider Ayush doctors, it goes to one in 700, not even 700, one in 666, which is way better than WHO. We have lot of doctors, but the problem is distribution. I told you this in the earlier podcast also. You remember that?
Yeah.
That we have a distribution problem. We don't have a
Urban
shortage
rural issue है.
problem.
Very good. So मैं तेरे को अभी एक question पूछता हूँ. So a
Uh,
perfect way you have given me the segue. So one person is actually asked this. I'll read the literal question because we'll have to take audience questions now. So someone has said, I don't know if this has been asked before, but what are Dr. Amit Thadani's thoughts on reluctance of new doctors to work in rural areas and possible ways we can improve primary healthcare in these regions?
Yeah, so you'll be surprised that a lot of doctors actually are going back from tier 1 cities to their tier 2, tier 3 cities.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so they are actually going back because now the infrastructure in their area has developed better. They have light, they have decent schools. See, every doctor also is ultimately a social person. He wants his family to have a certain quality of life, certain dignity. He wants to give the child a good education. He wants to, live. And tier 2, tier 3 cities, doctors are earning quite well. No, they are not earning badly. They are earning quite well because their running cost is also very low, right? So doctors are actually going back to their cities, and I have actually had doctors who have attached to my hospital, at least half a dozen doctors who have actually gone back to their native place, and they are doing well, very well over there. They've set up their hospitals in those areas, so
So
people
this
are
is
actually
this
going
sounds
back.
like a case of, you know what, that it's like मुर्गी पहले आया कि अंडा पहले आया. The economy is growing. It means the trickle down effect, to use a term like something like Keynesian term, is actually now going back to the tier 2, tier 3 rural areas. Now there is a market created. So doctors are like, मैं यहाँ पे क्यों रहूँ, मेरी cost of living उधर कम होएगी, वहां पे मेरे को stress नहीं होगा जो urban center में होता है. Is that the reason that the
Yeah, yeah.
economy has grown a little bit?
Yes, so people are actually going back, and that the reason is that the social situation in their areas, economic situation in their areas has become better. Patient paying capacity may not have become much better, but their numbers are. You'll be shocked to see how many cases they do compared to an urban city dweller, a doctor. They have much larger volumes of work. The patients pay them much lesser, but they have much higher numbers,
Yeah, but the
and their
overall
running
cost
cost
must
is
be
very
lower,
less.
right?
I mean, the staff who's going to work at my hospital for 25,000, maybe only 10,000 in their areas. So there is a problem, and why doctors don't go back is, now they are going back, but earlier they wouldn't go back because of this. Now the other aspect of this is the bonds. Now doctors not going back to serve their bonds, right? Why?
Explain what bonds are, because many people may
Yeah,
not know it.
so bonds are something like, the government medical colleges, very many of them, states have a restriction that if you've done your medical education from a government medical college, you need to serve out 1 year, 2 years, whatever, these many years in a government hospital on a government job before you are allowed to be released. Otherwise you have to pay some 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs penalty, right? Now doctors are ready to serve their bonds in the rural areas, mind you, but the problem is that state governments don't allot them their bond immediately after they finish their course. They don't make them do their bond before they join their course also. So either you tell them that you serve your bond first for a year, then you do your PG,
Mm-hmm.
or you finish your PG, work 1 year bond, and then go,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what they do is join your PG, finish your PG, and at some future time in life we will call you to do your bond, because
That's
right
not
now
fair.
so that we don't have a seat right now where we can put you. This is the problem. So our associations have approached the government, told them that very easy solution: you give the bond posting immediately, right? They will all serve their bond. If you call them at some future later date, the person may not even be in the country by then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then tell them that now you do your bond, otherwise you pay the money. That means you're after the money and not the work,
Mm-hmm.
right? You want the money, you don't want the person to go in the village and work.
Got it.
So people must realize this, that doctors have no issues in going and working in the rural. In fact, AMO ship is part of internship,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every single doctor is already being sent to a rural area to work for 3 months during their internship. They all do it. You won't see anybody cribbing about that. All of them do it. All of them appreciate the experience which they had during that time.
Mhm.
So it's not as if doctors don't want to go there. Now, why doctors should have why doctors should have a bond at all? They actually shouldn't, because we are not the only profession which is, functioning from a government institute. Like, all IIT education is subsidized. You have most of your specialist courses which run by government. All of them are subsidized. So why target only doctors to go and serve in the
But
urban
they would come
areas?
back to you and say this is a
Yeah.
sensitive area.
Okay. Force them immediately. They are willing. You don't give the posting. You give them at some future date and then say now you do it. So after a person is well settled in life, he'll just say, okay, okay, I'll avoid. I won't do it. Whether you'll be paid a salary during that time, that's also doubtful.
Hmm.
So the other aspect of it was doctor said, okay, fine, I have done pediatric surgery or I have done cardiac surgery. You're going to put me in a village where I will have no facilities whatsoever to do even basic surgery, let alone cardiac or pediatric surgery. Isn't that a waste of resources? You put me in a place where there is the infrastructure to do the work. You will have
Mhm.
specialty work happening at your secondary tier 2 and tier 3 areas.
Mhm.
But do the governments want infrastructure there? Do they have infrastructure there? No. Do they give posting like that? No. The way this entire thing is structured, it's not as if doctors don't want to go. I'm telling you again, doctors are very open minded about going and doing the work in rural, but their request is you allot them at that time when they're just finishing their work.
Mhm.
You allot them work commensurate with their qualification. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, I guess. All right. The next question is on the violence. So they say, is violence a rural urban problem, and how much of it is based on uh, is it a class struggle? I think the person asking the question is really inspired by Marxism. So what do you make of it? It is more of a rural or a urban problem? Like who is which areas are more prone to violence?
It happens everywhere. In Assam, it was inside a primary healthcare of a tea estate where the doctor was murdered by a mob.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in big cities also, where I gave you so many examples.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my friend I told you his hospital was burned down. It was in a tier 3 city at that time. It was in Pain, not even a tier 2 at that time. Pain
Mm-hmm.
was nothing more than just a small town at that time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is across the board. It's not according to this thing. And now we've had people who are perfectly affording, as I told you, person who's affluent class person also doing the same kind of behavior that a street dweller would give. It's more the psyche and mentality of the person, that someone is there who is going to try every sort of trick so that he doesn't have to pay those kind. In the government hospitals, it's definitely lower socioeconomic, because no person who can even afford a little bit will go to a government hospital. So in the government, it's definitely, as I said, communication gaps and frustration with the general way that people are treated in the government hospitals.
All right. So someone has asked, is the Cuba model of medical education something worth exploring in a country with a huge shortage of doctors? Actually, I just want to correct, there is no shortage of doctors
There
in
is no
India.
shortage of doctors.
So, but do you think like Cuba has a very high doctor to population ratio? Is that a model
So,
worth emulating?
so then you have to be prepared to pay accordingly. Then, no? See,
Hmm.
cost of the if you have a surplus of doctors, right, and you have two less patients to treat, it will become the Tamil Nadu kind of situation where doctors are MBBS level doctors are struggling now
Hmm.
to get patients. Now, there are consequences to having too many doctors. One consequence is obviously that when there is not enough work, people are going to start migrating out,
Hmm.
right? And nahi hoga kaam. If you have too high doctor population ratio, the doctors will be able to sustain only if the tariffs go sky high. Otherwise, doctors are going to start moving to better countries. They will not be able to sustain there. There has to be enough work to feed their family. If there isn't, they will move on to other areas.
So this is an interesting question. So somebody's asked, I think this person is from South Africa. What are insurance rates like in India? In South Africa, doctors, especially obstetrics, can pay up to 35K monthly. I think it's USD, if I'm not mistaken, for medical risk insurance against litigation. So, what is it like in India? How much litigation cost is it?
See, in India, comparatively, people get sued a lot less than other countries. Even now, I'll say that. Though the numbers are on the increase, it's still not very much because our judicial system sucks, frankly. So
Mhm.
nobody has real faith in them as such. But the insurance premiums are not high. On an average, about uh, 1%, between 1 and 3%, depending on the faculty. So, for example, if I need a cover of 1 crore, I would
Mhm.
have a premium of between 10,000 and 30,000, depending on the
Okay.
on what qualification the person has. So if it's a plastic surgeon, they'll have the highest. If it's a pediatrician or a physician, they would have it lower. General surgeons like me would be somewhere in between. So
Mhm.
maybe around 20,000 or something. So that's roughly how much it is. It's not as high because the cost of treatment here is not that high. 35,000 USD is a very very high amount of cost in India, and you can do very complicated and difficult surgical treatments in that kind of a budget. कितना हो जाता है उसका 3350 3.5 into 7, so that you can get a liver transplant done in that kind of a budget in India, which is the most expensive surgery.
All right. So, before wrapping up, Amit, so tell me, look, from what I have understood from how you have presented it, it is, I think a lot of it is a communication issue. Communication failures can happen at the end of the government. Communication can happen, failures can happen at the end of the doctors too. It can happen at the end of the cops. Look, the solution can't be everybody leave India. The solution has to be we solve, we are living in India, we are citizens of India, we're in this together, right? And also counseling of patients, potential patients and citizens of India.
Mm.
So can you tell me 4 or 5 things that might be, and that should be the ending? I don't want to end on a negative note, I want to end on a positive note. So
Yeah.
do you tell me solutions where maybe this, if these things are done, like counseling or whatever, then maybe we can have a better future and doctors get less harassed in India.
Yes, first of all, doctors need to improve their communication skills, because bad communication is a very important reason why people get agitated. So, doctors and all medical professionals need to seriously upgrade their communication skills and not think that is below their dignity to communicate well with the patient. Drop the high and mighty attitude if at all you have it. Most people don't have it nowadays because they've realized what it means. So but still, if anyone still keeps a high and mighty attitude, they need to change that immediately. Patients should have kind of realistic expectations from the treatment and not expect miracles with every time. Be a little more forgiving for minor things that can be forgiven. Something really gross which cannot be forgiven, yes. But you recently there was this social media celeb who created a big hangama because a ward boy accidentally entered her cubicle while an ECG was being taken, and then it escalated, and then eventually, I mean, the poor guy didn't even know that the patient is there, right? We have colleagues working in that hospital, so these sort of mistakes do happen, and he did apologize, but the patient is not willing to accept the apology. So at some point patients realize that they need to step back and let go, that people are human, they do make mistakes, not everything is deliberately done,
Mm-hmm.
right? uh, Patients also need to realize that doctor is not god. They need to seriously dissociate from the line that doctors are next to gods, because doctors don't want to be gods. We do not want to be gods, we are not gods, we are extremely human with all human frailties that come in all sorts of people and all professions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we are definitely not gods. और दूसरा चीज ऐसा है ना कि if you are god, then I have an unrealistic expectation from you that you will do the impossible.
Mm-hmm.
If you are god, then I have an unrealistic expectation that I'll pay you anything or nothing for that, and you should still be happy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it, playing God is not in doctor's interests. Being treated as gods or being called कि आप भगवान के जैसे हैं, तो you have to just fold your hands and say कि please don't say that,
Mm.
right? So doctors must realize that one, they are not God. They already know that they are not, because when they lose every single patient, or something goes wrong with the patient, it cruelly reminds them that they are not God and they can never be God also, right? Patients should also remember this, that these there are some things which are not under the doctor's control. There are some things which the doctor could have controlled but failed to control, and that in either case, violence is not a solution to that. They
Mm.
can sit, talk, don't like it, you can file a case in the consumer forum, pull that doctor to court, get due compensation. There are so many legal avenues available now. In fact, the doctors associations are now forming patient support groups. So if there is a grudge, you don't want to go to court, but you want the doctor to apologize, to pay compensation, you can approach the local doctors body. The Indian Medical Association has a segment for it. Some of the association chapters have got a very active support segment for it. IMA Chembur has got, IMA Nagpur has got. So there are IMAs which are running fora where they can support the patient. The patient approaches them with complaints against a doctor in their area. If the doctor is their member, the association pulls up the doctor and asks them, okay, what is going on? What is going wrong? They'll call the patient, the doctor, to try to create an amicable, this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, the police does that work in a kind of, after many programs. If there is a kind of thing like that, the police always will call someone. We call the patient, call the doctor, make them sit across, and try to see if some solution can be worked out.
Mm-hmm.
So there are ways and means to get around, this issue. But as I said, that more importantly, it needs to be an attitudinal shift, that we aren't here to loot you, right? We are here to help patients get well. Our primary goal in life is to help patients get well. We are not some corporate honchos sitting there. We are not. If I'm telling you, a guy like me who's done 12 years of his life into this profession, like 12 years of study, could have very well earned three times what I'm earning now by doing an MBA finance or working in a bank, maybe four times, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not, right? Not because I can't, but because I prefer this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So doctors earn well. I'm not saying doctors don't earn well. They earn a reasonably good amount so that they can live a decent life. It's not that, but that's just about it. If you look at the superstars and assume that the lower rung also earns the same amount, not true. So have some realistic expectations. Have a little bit of faith. Be on your guard whenever you want to when you're meeting your doctor. Double check with the second opinion if required, right? If you feel that the doctor is not making sense, have a family doctor whom you can approach. This concept of family doctor is now disappearing, and people are reading Google reviews. Google reviews can be faked, right? Google reviews can be faked,
Yeah, I know.
but
I agree with you.
right, there can be people who have stellar Google reviews, but they are fake, right?
Mm.
Don't go by that. Have trust in your local family doctor and take their guidance. They will not send you to a wrong place, because they also want to retain you as a customer,
Mm.
right? I'm saying customer because that's what it is. At the end of the day, it's a consumer provider relationship. They also know that if you go to someone else and the patient is not okay, something goes wrong, it backfires on them also.
Yeah.
So have some faith in them, right? Have if your family doctor is a specialist, even better, right? They will generally be very cautious about what they will advise you nowadays. And I'll say earlier also they were, but now they are even more cautious, because everyone has data available at the tips of their fingers.
Absolutely.
So you need to just have a little we are not all bad as yet, and they're not going to be also in the near future. But what's happening is there is a hardening of you'll see so many doctors used to go for medical camps earlier, free camps.
Mm-hmm.
Now very few are offering that. you know we have to struggling to get doctors for doing medical camps,
Mm.
because they see that we are constantly being targeted. We do so much of free service. A patient comes to our place, patient can't afford, we just tell the theek hai, jaane de mat de. If a patient can't afford the fees, naturally they'll say, okay, we let go of so much of fees, right? Even in the OPD. Eh, like I have so many patients coming in, and we consider all these factors when we are treating patients. It's not
Mm,
as if we don't consider them. So have a little trust, but don't expect charity when the patient is capable of paying. When the patient is capable of paying, they should not create a unnecessary fuss. If there are some wrong charges in the bill, of course you must point them out. If there is charges which you feel that should not have been put, you must point them out. But don't think that there are some negative aims and ambitions, or that the doctor is going to earn some massive amounts by doing this. Maybe it's an honest mistake. Maybe they have a lousy, incompetent billing person. There can be so many things. It's not necessary that everything is the way that people will think of it, right? So that's all I'll say, and I'll just say that we are not God. Don't think of us as God. Think of us as hardworking professionals trying to make you well, and for the most part, we will overcome the obstacles that the Consumer Protection Act has put on our heads. I also want the doctor-patient relationship to be the topmost priority for every doctor, and that is restoration of the doctor-patient trust and relationship is the only way that we can cross these barriers. And there are a lot of vested interests who do not want this relationship to be there
true.
because they can exploit it. I think we need to go back to having a very healthy doctor patient relationship, and that will ultimately come from trust, from having less commercialization of the profession, and having constant contact with one or two doctors whom you can rely on, whom you have relied on in the past.
All right. So, guys, I think we'll wrap today's discussion on this note. Look, we made a lot of points on this podcast, whether it's about from the doctor's perspective, from the government perspective, from a patient's perspective. There are many things that need to be done. The solution lies in being positive and working towards it on a step by step basis. Um, Amit has always been kind, and Amit has a lot more patience than I do. I have to say that. So in that sense, but Amit, as always, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, man.
Thank you for calling, and this was really a podcast which I wanted to do, and thank you for giving enough time for answering the questions, for elaborating the issues, because this really needs to be spoken at length.
Well, my platform is always open for you guys. All right, guys, we'll wrap today's discussion up. So you can do two things when you either watch this video or when you're going to be uh, listening to this on Spotify, iTunes, whatever. You should go to the description of the podcast. You can check Amit's Twitter handle. I've also shared the link to Amit's website. He writes beautiful blogs. You should read his blogs, especially during the whole COVID thingy that was happening. So please go and follow Amit on social media. You can visit his website. As far as I'm concerned, well, please support the Cārvāka podcast by subscribing to the channel, liking this video, leaving your comments below it. You can also support the podcast monetarily by either becoming a member on YouTube or a subscriber on Patreon, or you can buy the Cārvāka podcast merch. Something that I'm wearing right now is not the podcast merch, but it is part of the merch. So you can go on kushalmehra.com or on Kadak merch, or you can send your donations directly through UPI. I will see you guys next time with another interesting discussion. Until then, namaste, take care, goodbye.